first. I used this one time in 12 years. I used this one time in 12 years when I did my last Plan Commission meeting. And I just used it for the first time again. So, this is the May 16th, 2011 meeting of the Finance Committee of the City Council of Lake Forest. Could we call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Cowie.
Here.
Chairman Pandelian.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Waldeck.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Here.
Alderman Morsch.
Here.
Alderman Schoenheider. Alderman Palmer.
Here.
Alderman. Alderman Edelman.
Here. This is going to be.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is consideration of minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on April 18th, 2011. Are there any additions or comments or changes to the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is opposition to the reduction of income tax distribution to the City of Lake Forest. I'll editorialize by the State of Illinois.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. Included in your packet and then later on in your City Council agenda this evening is a draft resolution that was prepared first by the Illinois Municipal League and Northwest Municipal Conference, and they've asked the local communities to tailor it to their own specific needs. But very simply, I think everybody is familiar with the financial condition of the state of Illinois, and they're looking to fill the gap of their budget. And one of the things that has been floated out there is taking a portion of the city or the local communities' local government distributive fund, which is effectively the income tax, we've heard up to 30%, which for the City of Lake Forest would be roughly $450,000. Total in the state would be about $300 million. There's been a lot of conversation, and as of even 11 a.m. this morning, people from the Illinois Municipal League and Northwest Municipal Conference said that it's still in a state of flux, that members of both the House and Senate are playing it pretty close to the vest in terms of how they're going to be able to balance the budget and whether they'll take 0, 5, 10, 20, or 30% of the local distributive fund. One of the things I think that's really important to emphasize here is this is not state money. That back when back in 1970 with the state constitution, that basically there was an understanding that this local governments would get a share of the income tax in lieu of them having their own income tax. Because if you go to a lot of states, there are local state income tax fees. And so the state really just collects this for the local governments and then transmits them to the local communities. And they used to be fairly prompt. I think right now we're about 3 months behind, and they've collected it, but they haven't transmitted it yet to the communities. They're just sitting on our money. And but we're hoping that they won't take any more than well, they take nothing. But from Kathy's and my perspective, anything more than 10% is problematic, because we, in preparing the FY12 budget, put in a loss of 10%, or roughly $150,000, just as a cushion in case they did take some action. So if they don't take that, or if they take 10% or less, we're fine. We've got it covered in our budget. If it's anything more than that, then we'll have to watch our budget closely as we go forward, and hopefully other revenues will come in over budget, or we'll have to cut expenses so that we bring the budget back into balance. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. The resolution that's before you basically spells all that out and just goes officially on record opposing any reduction in the local government distributive fund payments to the city. And I will say in closing that a copy of this has been submitted to our state representatives to just let them know that this was before the City Council for consideration this evening. Be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Alderman Edelman.
Thank you. 2 questions. Were the LGDF monies coming from income taxes or real estate taxes?
Income taxes.
Income taxes, okay. And the second question is, so what recourse ultimately do we have? Can a consortium of municipalities actually file a lawsuit against the state to claim those funds?
No, my understanding is the only recourse we have is to do exactly what we're doing, which is to be as outspoken as we possibly can. But they can modify the law to basically reduce, I think we're at 1/10 right now of 1%. They could reduce that percentage down to basically take whatever amount they want.
Thank you.
What's their, when do they have to act on this by? End of May. End of May?
Yeah.
So we'll know.
We'll know within a couple of weeks.
I move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a tie. I'm going to let the tie go to Alderman Morsch. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, good. Thank
All
you.
ayes, no.
This will be on the regular city council agenda.
The next item is the review of the proposed recycling cart program. It's presented by Michael Thomas, Director of Public Works.
Again.
Yes, good
We get to
evening.
hear about this again.
At least we're not talking about trucks. We're good for 6 months on that. Mr.
No more
Chairman,
trucks?
Honorable Mayor, members of the Finance Committee, this evening, staff would like to present to you our
Wait,
recycling.
Michael,
cart-
can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I should, just for the record, point out that Michael appears before you this evening as our new Director of Public Works. So
read
now
that
don't
without
mess
any-
up, all right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, don't call me when it snows. With regards to our recycling, we've had our recycling program here in the city since 1991. In August of 2008, we expanded our program to begin to collect additional materials. Since then, we began to hear a lot from residents asking if we could switch to these carts. And last August, we sent a survey. We simply did it in-house. Sent a survey to all single-family homes. We only collect single-family homes. We were very happy with the response rate. Over 51% of the households responded. And those that were in support of us providing these carts, the breakdown is in front of you. I was hoping we would have a very clear-cut, yes, we want them, or no, we don't, and lo and behold, it's right down the middle. Ward 4 has the highest support rate. We presented the survey results at the September 20th Finance Committee, and at that point, the Finance Committee voted to implement an optional cart program, and that would be done over the city's website. Since then, we have applied for a grant. We've looked into this a little bit further, looked at the costs, and we're coming back with a proposed program for you to consider. Number one, we would phase out the 16-gallon bins and implement this recycling cart program. All the other communities in Lake County have these carts for recycling. We are one of the last, if not the last, still using the bins. We want to be, to a certain extent, responsive of the survey, recognizing when you read some of those responses and some of the comments that were made by the residents, some of them truly do not want them. And what we would like to do is be at least flexible for this first year and invite the households that are interested in acquiring a cart to sign up via the city's webpage, and we would deliver a cart probably in September. We have, and then the second half of the city, the second 3,200 homes we'd roll out in the following fiscal year. We've applied for a grant through the state. The state's fiscal year ends June 30th. And in our contacts and discussions with the state, things are looking up, but nothing is quite finished yet. But the challenge here is that if we are awarded the grant, they are looking for us to request reimbursement by the end of June. So we've put this somewhat on the fast track to present this to you this evening. We're currently out to bid for these carts, and hopefully everything comes together in early June. In addition to the $100,000 grant, we have $60,000 budgeted in the capital program. The proposed timeline, we hope and keep our fingers crossed that the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity will determine the grantees by June 1st. We will come back to you, if that is the case, on June 6th to award bids for the carts. We'll work on setting up our public relations, advertising, promotions during the month of June. Residents then, for the rest of the summer into early October, if they would like a cart, can sign up for one via the city, the webpage, and we'll begin delivering the carts after Labor Day. A couple of program points. Again, we're looking at a 2-year rollout. We, again, collect 6,500 homes with a $100,000 grant plus 60 in the budget. That will allow us the ability to purchase half the carts this year, half the second year. 4% of the households, we did a survey of all of our stops, 4% of the households have what we refer to as exceptionally long driveways. And unless they can bring that cart out to us, we're going to recommend that they stay with the bins. A lot of these people will put 3, 4, 5 bins in the back of their car when they're driving out to work or driving their kids to school, drop the bins at the end of the curb. Our equipment, there's no way for us to get down these long driveways and be able to pick up these large carts. We can with our scooters now in the bins because they're easy to handle and they can dump in, but picking up a large cart would be very, very difficult. As far as the old carts, the old bins, residents, if they so choose, they can keep the bins or we will collect them and recycle them. The cart, as you see in front of us, there are 3 or 4 major cart manufacturers. This is a demonstration unit that we received from one of the companies. We're looking at a simple design just with our city logo on it. That's a 65-gallon cart. They make 95 and 35, but we're proposing the 65. The goal, obviously, is to try to increase the recycling and to really push and promote residents recycling more material. If households are looking for a second cart, we would recommend at that point that they purchase them, that they pay the $50. That's what these end up costing approximately. But the first cart, we would provide to all the residents for free. And then in FY13, again, we'd go through the same process, apply for the grant, budget money in our capital account, come back to you for award of bid. So that, in a very quick nutshell, is the program that we're proposing. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
When these go to the curb, do they have to be aligned facing a
They
certain
do.
way?
Initially, the equipment that we currently have, it's referred to as semi-automated, and that the guy's going to still have to get out of the truck, wheel these to the front, hook them up to a cart tipper. But when we retire those trucks and replace them, then we'll go ahead with the ones with the automated arm, and you are correct. So education is going to be very important for us right up front to ask the residents to place the carts accordingly, so we can reach them, and the hinge on the lid is facing the house.
This, conversation for the benefit of new members of council. One of the thoughts we had, are we going to phase this in a regional basis or just random basis in the 4 wards?
In our staff's discussion on this, and again, trying to be responsive to half of those residents in the survey that came out pretty strong saying they are not interested in the carts, that they do not want them for whatever reason. They're too big, don't have room in their garage, they don't like the aesthetics. We wanted to try and roll it out on a volunteer basis for this first year, and hopefully, for lack of a better term, the peer pressure will help. People will talk about them, ask questions about them, they'll see their neighbor has them. The second year then, we would roll out the remaining part of the town. So, for lack of a better term, they'd have a 1-year hiatus, and then we would roll it out for the entire town.
From a collection basis, it
Doesn't matter.
really make-
It doesn't matter. Our trucks, we have 2 recycling trucks, and they can handle these or the bins on the other side, so it's fine with us. When we replace those trucks, it's going to be important, yes, that we've got all the carts, because that's where we're going to gain our efficiencies. We'll be able to fly through the route a lot quicker with the automated arm, so.
And just talking to some residents, and again, this is a practicality position. One of the thoughts was, well, the old bins you could take into your home, collect your recycling, and the residents will be allowed to keep the old bins so they could bring the bins out, empty them into the new item or
Sure.
bin, and take it out to the
Correct.
street.
Absolutely. In the grant application, we had to know what we were proposing to do with the old recycling bins. They wanted to see that we were recycling them. So the place that we take all of our material to agreed to accept them and recycle them. If the resident, and that's one of the things we're going to put in on the webpage, if the resident chooses to keep the bin, they'll note that up front, so when we deliver the cart, we will not take the bin, we'll leave it. But we're going to keep this all organized so we know who we delivered the carts to, when we did, whether they kept the bins or not. We'll have all that information.
Can they continue to use the bins after the 2-year period? Or is that not an
We're
option?
saying no. We're saying no. The 4%, there's approximately 265 households that represent that 4% that we really have a difficult time getting. And those we would still collect the bins. But we're looking to go for the carts, primarily from a fiscal standpoint. The money that we're receiving on the recyclables tends to be good. We had a bad year in 2009, but every other year it's been $40 to $60 a ton. So we could earn an additional, if we see our material increase by 20%, it's another $25,000 that we'll receive in revenue, and then on tipping fees at the landfill, that material comes out of that, it's another $25,000. So from a fiscal standpoint, it makes sense for us to try and get these out and encourage people to recycle as much as possible. It's a win-win on both sides.
And from an educational standpoint, myself being in this group where I try to have one bin for the paper, one bin for the bottles, does it really make a difference?
No, it doesn't. Ever since August of 2008, we no longer separate the material, so everything can be mixed together. Everything gets placed in a transfer trailer, it's all mixed together.
Just, I wasn't around for the prior discussions about this. When you switched to, or you added the capacity for recycling all those additional materials in 2008, I think you said?
Correct.
What happened to the volumes on both the regular trash and the recyclable materials?
It was interesting because that's when the economy began to take a dip. We had about 2 or 3 months of some very good numbers, and then our numbers really began to go down. The refuse side has gone down significantly.
I get why people had less garbage because they weren't spending any money on anything?
There it is. That's exactly it. When excuse me, when the economy is booming, we have a lot of garbage.
Amazing.
We can go anywhere from 9,000, 9,500 tons a year to down to 7,500. We've picked back up again a little bit now. But with that expansion of the recycling program, one of the reasons we're able to do it is that all this material we drive over to the compost center. From 1991 all the way to the fall of 2008, we were driving to North Chicago and Grays Lake every day. So that saved time, saved some manpower. Everything now goes over to the compost center and we transfer it out of there.
And so the volume of regular non-recyclables is, I mean, is this shift been dramatic?
There has been a shift. Since August of 2008, we've seen about a 5% increase in recyclables and the same amount, obviously, the reduction on the garbage side. But we saw an even further reduction on the garbage side because of the economy. But again, those tonnages have begun to pick back up.
I just know from my own family, we had two of these bins and 2 regular garbage cans, and we regularly fill up now both of the recyclable bins, and oftentimes don't even have a garbage bag in the garbage can. And with the second garbage can, I'm going to have to donate to charity or something. I don't need it anymore.
Sure.
So
sure,
I mean,
and that's the goal of the recycling cart. In theory, it makes it easier for the resident to recycle. Everything goes in one cart, easy to get to the curb. A little challenging in some of the garages, but they have done studies throughout the U.S. where they've introduced these carts and they've seen an increase of 15 to 20%. So in this town where there's a lot of newspaper, there's a lot of cardboard, we should do very well.
and with the covers on them, the stuff won't be blowing all over everybody's front lawn on a windy day like today.
Correct.
And nobody can see how many wine bottles or beer bottles or
There you go.
just the big party.
I wasn't going to go there,
All
Bob.
sensitive, all sensitive. By the way, if the state is going to short us on our income tax distribution, can we put that in our grant application? Like, hey, give us at least $100,000 back as a grant? I mean, where's the state getting off giving grants like this if it's in such trouble?
Great question, and that's one of the reasons when we were talking to the state, we asked them specifically how sure are you of having the money? And they said they have the money allocated in their budget. They've made their recommendations to their department head, and they're waiting for that to go through the process, and that we should hear within a couple weeks. So I was surprised as well that they have money to offer in grants.
This
But-
might be money they have in their current budget.
Correct,
They
it
want
is.
to spend it before they lose it.
Yeah.
It is. It's money that is in the current budget that expires June 30th, so.
And just for the sake of the cost of the materials that we get from recycling, we're in the positives now where we're actually making
We are.
money?
We're making very good money now. Net after transport, we're probably around $60 to $65 a ton. We're probably $10,000 to $12,000 a month now in recyclables. So it's very, very good.
Net, that's net of all the costs associated with accumulating it?
Well, yes, but what that does not include is, I didn't calculate what that equals taking it out of the garbage side. But yes, it does. It's net. It's a net number.
Great.
So it's very good. It's all, recycling is 100% supply and demand. Environmental issues, it's good environmentally, but these products are purchased by companies overseas, and they use them as raw materials. So as long as the demand is there, the money, the revenue will be high.
This is a discussion item only, so are there any other further questions or comments?
Where could I get one if I just want to show off one in my neighborhood?
We have a handful, we can let you borrow one. We've got a handful of demonstrator models that each company gave us to look at. So, sure, you can put one out and see if you get any phone calls.
I'm just saying that because he's the chairman of Public Works.
Because I might wind up in
Okay,
it.
with that said, can you please pass all your papers over there?
This is not on the city council agenda for later, is it?
It is not, for
Okay.
the evening. This was information only, right?
Correct.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh,
Is
Thank
there
you.
any way we could get any advertising or naming rights on those garbage cans?
Don't go down there.
Sure. Yeah, the interesting thing with these cards, you can put anything you want on them, but when we read through the comments on the survey, the aesthetic issue was one that came through very loud and clear. And I think we believe at the staff level, a simple city logo, nothing else. Less is better.
But we can refer to it here as the Novit.
Yeah.
If you
can
wish.
Put your law firm's name on it. if you'd like.
I've been called worse things. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, everybody. The next item on our agenda is approval of the naming rights policy for parks and recreation facilities, presented by Mary Van Arsdale, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Chairman, Alderman, and Mayor. As we mentioned, I'm here tonight to just kind of give you an overview of a new policy that we wanted to have considered, and that was to establish a policy for a consistent procedure and criteria for naming and renaming of park recreation facilities and major park amenities. And just a little background is that this directly came out of the ad hoc finance committee work that was done about a year and a half ago, which was made up of a committee that was appointed by the mayor. It was 2 aldermen, 2 park board members, 2 residents from the community, and our foundation president. And looking at the challenges facing Parks and Recreation in particular, this was one of the items that they came back and said they felt we should consider and look at as a Park and Rec board and bring back to City Council for discussion. So that's really where it really started to evolve from. Since that time, the Park Board did conduct some research in conjunction with the staff, and then that's how we crafted what we've somewhat put here tonight for you to consider. The other aspect about it is we did pull in different policies from all over the area, from not only from park districts, but municipalities, private entities in the area, as well as some national situations, as well as Bob Kiley and I hosted a meeting with a variety of individuals from the community that run either foundations associated with the city or other organizations in the community to kind of get their feedback on this as well. So we tried to gather some views on this, try to look at if there was aspects about the policy that was needed to be fine-tuned or what have you, and you know, we got some great feedback on that, and we also met, of course, with the city attorney Vic and Marlo to take a look at it as well. Just kind of in general, I would say, I won't go through every single aspect about it, but we did break it into 6 different articles of information in the proposed policy, the purpose, which I've already covered with you, and the background. We do recognize very much the sensitivity to this topic and the challenges in a community as ours. We have a tremendous history of giving and support in this community that is unmatched to anything that I have seen, and that was one of the things that we certainly are not trying to you know, say that we have not appreciated that or we don't see that going forward. But this was an opportunity, we thought, to, you know, give us a framework and maybe be a little bit more flexible when we have opportunities possibly coming our way. There is no proposal on the table for the Parks and Recreation Board at this time, you know, to ask for a naming rights of any sort, but this was kind of getting that framework so if we had such a situation, we could look at that. We did put together a review and approval process with the concept is that if an idea or proposal came to us, it would first come to the mayor and the city council, and you would review that concept to see if it even has any interest by the council and the mayor to go any further. We recognize there are certain amenities in the community or facilities that would be very sensitive, and we would like the discussion really to begin at the level of the council and the mayor. Should they feel that there is some merit to it, an opportunity for us to continue to look at it, then it would come on to the park board, and the park board would begin more of the community dialogue and research and, you know, discussing it more in depth with the community, and then it would eventually come back to city council again for your review and your approval. So there was obviously some opportunity here to have a lot of dialogue on any of these kind of items that would come up. After that, we also put in some of the other restrictions were signage, that we would go through the Department of Community Development to make sure it would meet anything that might be a signage ordinance or signage concern. It would be all part of the vetting process that we would do that would be public, and obviously we would bring that through as a total package for the consideration of Park Board and the City Council if we got to that level. And then the other aspect about it was we were really seeking people who, if we were going to do a naming right, was for a significant gift, not minor things like park benches or water drinking fountain. This was for significant things. And to go that route, we were really recommending, the Park Board felt very strongly about this too, was that it needed to cover not only the acquisition or the implementation of, you know, adding an asset to ours or improving it significantly, but that it would have an endowment or ability to help us with the maintenance of that going forward too. So this isn't a short-term, you know, get a name on something and a year later you would be changing it or doing something different. The intent here was really to have somebody's interest and commitment to go forward with it. And we have categories, as we mentioned in here, from a major gift, individual, and historical perspective, so we would look at all those aspects. And then we did added some things about restrictions, things we would want to be very sensitive to, and why we wouldn't want to consider, you know, doing some naming rights. That again falls back on, you know, giving an opportunity to look at things from a historical perspective, or if they were unable to help with the maintenance aspect of the gift that they were giving us. Recognition, we started out very simple, saying it was a name and a plaque. If they wish to deviate from that, then, you know, we would have to really have that as part of the full vetting, you know, discussion. And I know a long time ago with talking with some of the staff, the executive staff, you know, we really recognize that this needs to be on a case-by-case basis. Because if, let's say, somebody wanted to name a pavilion at the lakefront, what you would want to do there to have a naming right and a sign or whatever might be completely different than what you might do at, say, Northcroft Park, or what you might do at South Park, small, very small pavilion. So these are very, they have to be customized to some extent no matter what option would come forward to us. and that we would take all of that into consideration, what would be appropriate. I think another sensitivity is the concern of the large corporate sponsorship. And I know we looked at examples. There are nearby communities around us who do corporate sponsorship. And, you know, obviously there's opportunities. We have a lot of people in our community that run their own private businesses or, you know, want that type of connection. And I will say that with Parks and Recreation, we specifically saw opportunities with sport fields and that, you know, you tend to get more interest in. You know, Brunswick is an example in town who is very much known for their sporting industry. You know, maybe they'd be interested in doing something like that. And we have had residents who've asked us about that and why we don't allow it or would we allow it at the baseball diamonds and that kind of thing. So we did put some restrictions and some guidelines to why we would look at things. And then obviously we put together just a potential list. This isn't all-inclusive. It just gave you a flavor for the opportunities. And it can be, you know, an entire park. We were talking about naming just maybe a playground. And playgrounds are not inexpensive these days, as you know, from the things we've been bringing through. I mean, they're anywhere from $100,000 on up. And so, you know, is there an opportunity there in some small way to encourage that if there's an interest? But we aren't out there as a department or as a park board shopping right now for naming opportunities. We're just trying to put a framework in place so that as we see a need or somebody has an interest, that they would know that that's something we might entertain or consider. So that's kind of the overview that I have. I'd like to, you know, turn it over for you for questions or comments.
Are there any questions or comments from the Alderman?
I have one question, Mary. You talk about potential naming opportunities and you list A through L. Obviously starts out at very large community parks down to baseball fields. Are you contemplating that you could name a field? I want to pick, you know, baseball diamond number 3 at Deer Path. Is that an opportunity, or how do you envision the whole?
Well, I think with those, the way the park board's discussion was that we would take it by amenity, but at the park. So if at Deer Path you wanted to do it, it would be for all 4 diamonds. So we wouldn't have multiple mixed signs going on in a park. Some parks only have 2. So if somebody only has an interest in doing 2, we would direct them, you know, to do Town Line or, you know, look at possibly Northcroft as an example. So we wouldn't try to piecemeal it up too much, but look at where they were going. A community park, I think, should have that bigger feel and continuity throughout the whole park when you're looking at an amenity. So
another question. When you talk about a major park, then from changing the name from Town Line, and I'm just throwing out, this is not a by any means thought of, but you know, pick like Motorola Park. I mean, is that really something we would envision, or are we really just trying to think of, you know, more of a local resident who wants to say the Stewart family or Stewart Park or Alderman Morse Park, you know, after he's left here, but. Yeah.
Quite honestly, I think we were open to the, you know, having that discussion. We've never really pursued that discussion and why we wouldn't want, you know, something like that. It's just not been entertained even before. So I think that the park board doesn't really have a sense of the whole community's interest in that, and that would be part of the common, you know, thing we would want to bring to everyone. But obviously, we would prefer the local connection and resident support and an individual or family's perspective, I think would be great. But, you know, again, if that, I don't know, if the CEO of Motorola lives in Lake Forest and had an interest in that and has been living here for, you know, 35 years, would be interested, would we, you know, if everybody in the community knows that individual and would want to do that, does that mean it would be just because it's a name, you know, that everybody knows? So those are the kinds of things I can't answer easily. I think that would be, you know, really for somewhat city council to say, do we want to do this in our community, and give us some guidance that way as well. So,
kind of lending in, I had a concern just on scope or comfort level on how to approach this, and possibly, at least, again, it's just maybe a personal preference, but I could see naming amenities if they want to be supported. But a park as a whole has more of a historic community attachment, and I'm not, at least for me, horribly receptive to taking a whole park and naming it after a company or having a sponsorship. You know, again, if Brunswick wants to come in and support specific amenities, God bless them, I'm all for it. they can plaster their name all over. But it's supporting a basic aspect of a park instead of the historical and community aspect. So maybe if we approach this on a smaller scale, we might gain some acceptance. You know, but again, I hate going for the big things.
Yeah,
And that's what we were challenged with too, because we recognize that a lot of our, or all of our parks to a large extent are historical parks, with the exception of Deer Path really and Town Line being community parks that have been created, you know, more recent years. So those are the challenges you certainly would have. So
could we, picking up on what Kent was saying, could we specifically exclude, say for example, well, we're excluding the renaming of South Park, but we would be open to, you know, a plaque on the baseball diamond, or perhaps a sign next to a new playground. Could we specifically state that if we chose to do so?
Sure, and you know, that's where we're kind of looking for what you're most interested in. The only thing you have to recognize is that the trade-off in monetary dollars coming in is going to be much, you know, less, because it's not as significant of a naming opportunity. So again, it's the trade-off and the comfort level that, you know, the council has, or, you know, park board wants to have. So
I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. But we've traditionally had large donations in the past from private individuals, and we've been able to get that money without the naming rights attached to it. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, I don't know how much has been from Parks and Recreation, more so large facilities in the community, whether it's Gorton or, you know, Ragdale or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we're in the new stage. You know, we're just looking at new. Bob Taylor just joined us, who's on our park board, and he worked with this policy as well with us. So, thanks, Bob.
I have a question on this procedure. At the top of this, it says chapter.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is that an ordinance chapter, or what chapter of what, or chapter what? Or
my understanding is it's not an ordinance, because there are not fees and fines associated with it. So it would be a policy in the chapter or the policy book of the city.
Okay, and the next question is that city council can currently accept a proposal to name anything and vote, right? There's nothing. This would just give, I think what this does is redirect the request to the Director of Parks and Rec instead of the City Council?
It would just come. It would just come into me, because it's Park and Rec, and would come on to you. I would bring it to you.
And then decide whether it came to City Council. Is that, or could somebody come to City Council directly or indirectly?
Yeah.
The intent of this was that they would just, for a formality, would put it in writing, so I would have something to give to you, so you knew what you'd be looking at, but it would come to you.
Everyone would come to City
Correct.
Council?
That would be correct.
It would just go to you first?
Correct. I would be your clearinghouse to bring it to you.
Okay, and I think, just to clear a little something up, I think former Alderman Grumhouse had mentioned this when we had touched upon this earlier, and I think was he part of that ad hoc finance committee?
Yes, he was the chair.
I think what he said, I think what he told me was only if there were a lot of zeros after it, which makes sense if you know him. But I think I just wanted to fairly represent, I think, some of the findings. I wasn't here for that ad hoc committee, but I think I heard some of the results of it, and I don't know if that makes sense with the list getting down to the 9 playgrounds and the 14 basketball and the 21 tennis courts. So are you saying, even though we've listed 21 tennis courts, it would really be bundles of tennis courts and
that would be correct.
A tennis facility at a certain park or something like that?
That would be correct, unless they wanted to do all tennis courts throughout all of town. But, you know, right now we would.
All the tennis courts are.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't do a tennis court. Just,
well,
you know.
I think it's I'll just make a comment and I'm done with my questions, but I think I would have a real problem with this. I think it's a bit of an assault on the character of the town to have at least corporate sponsorship. I don't like personally, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like U.S. Cellular Field. It's Comiskey Park for people and things like that. And I'm not much of a sports person, but I think that would just, that's where I would stand. So.
Just as a follow-on to that, and I remember we had extensive discussions about this at council when we went through Town Line Park. And we came to the conclusion at that time, and obviously this is a different city council, that much to your comments, David, that we felt that, you know, there was a certain character in our town about how we had West Park, South Park, and I think we struggled for a while to figure out what Town Line Park was, but we came up with Town Line Park, and it was debated quite a bit. There was a lot of discussion about it. And I would tend to feel the same way as I felt back then, which I felt that we shouldn't be. I mean, we have every authority in the world as a city council to accept a gift, which we have done historically. But I feel troubled on a policy basis setting up a program that encourages it. And so I would simply not be in favor of this. I just don't. I think it's way, way from the character of the town, and I think we have the ability to do it. And if we're going to build a big facility or something, why should it be limited to parks and rec facilities, for example? It should be any city asset, and I think as city council we could consider if a gift was significant enough, then we could take it on a case-by-case basis. But if we're going to be doing 10,000 here and 10,000 there, I just don't think that's the kind of money that's worth offering up. That's my point of view, anyway.
Is it fair to characterize this as an effort to create some sort of a framework around which to make these decisions, as opposed to a directive to go sell naming rights to all of the facilities in town?
That was correct. So we'd have a process if we had this come forward. But the other thing was, like when we did the Adopt-A-Park, it's always been known that if you wanted to give something to the community, you know, because you love that particular, you know, area or garden or whatever, it was always been there. But once we put the framework in and said we are taking Adopt-A-Park opportunities, you know, and here's, you know, how that would work, we now have 3 Adopt-A-Park options that we are considering, 2 at Elloa and now at the Dickinson Garden. So, you know, there is a thought out there in the community is that this is not something we entertain. I mean, there really is, you know, that type of attitude that this isn't Lake Forest, we've never considered that. And I think this was somewhat helping to open the door so there was consideration there. Not that we were saying we were going to do it on a mass scale or anything, but that there was an opportunity that we might be more willing and more interested in listening to those kinds of opportunities come forward. And I think that was more the intent.
So still case by case, but now guided by a policy that allows you to make a recommendation and a statement that it either is concurrent with the policy or not concurrent with the policy.
And one of the things that Bob and I talked about, Bob Kiley and I talked about particularly, was writing the policy in a fashion that this could be applicable to any department. I mean, you could just swap out a different name in here and this process works the same for any department of the city or foundation of the city. But I understand all the sensitivities with this, and I do appreciate it. I know Bob Taylor worked on this a little bit with the park board, so he wanted to make a couple comments.
Yeah, and I'm a 40-year resident of Lake Forest. The spirit of this is more of an endowment. It is, you know, David, big zeros. It's not a $10,000 park bench. It's not a plaque here. There's 1 million plaques, 1 million benches, and 1 million trees, and the city has been doing that for as long as I've lived here. But the idea was looking at, you know, Winnetka and the Nielsen Center and Highland Park and Cunliffe Park. It was to look at opening a door to a large endowment-like opportunity, not to sell, you know, a tennis court or not to sell this. And I think that was the spirit of what this is attempting to do. It's not attempting to put a for sale sign on Lake Forest. It's not attempting to make it easier to sell things and get names. It was an idea that if a, you know, founding father of Lake Forest passed away and wanted to donate $1 million or more, there was a program, a door for which they could approach. That was the spirit of which this was, and should be taken. It's not any, you know, it's to get away from the plaque and the tree and the bench that we've been doing very well with 1 million different kinds of plaques and benches and trees.
Yeah, the last page really
threw
me for a loop.
That's good, Bob, but it you know, we have very detailed little items here at the bottom of our packet, and it doesn't say the word $1 million in here or anything like that. So, I mean, I would be in favor of having a policy for the city for this to consider it. I just this is kind of narrow to Parks and Rec. And frankly, if, we're looking at outsourcing potentially the golf course, in outsourcing transactions, the value and the naming value of that will be very valuable to if we do have a outside partner on the golf course, for example. So I wouldn't want to sell that to a third party. You could probably get a lot of value in the process.
It was, again, to be a vehicle to bring this to your attention and let the mayor and the city council make a better informed decision, but not to certainly usurp or bypass this, but to try and bring some attention where there hasn't been.
And the danger when you promulgate a policy is that it becomes policy, which is, so you're.
Yeah, there was no sort of, there's not aha, we've got somebody thinking, we're gonna, call this Playboy Park or something like that. This was a thought of a vision of 5-10 years from now. There isn't any immediate need for this, but it was, again, looking at the parks in Lake Forest vis-a-vis all of the other community parks. And many of them have received hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in memorial that Lake Forest hasn't in its park system. And that was sort of the effort to create that vehicle.
But is there anything prohibiting, without this policy, if someone said, I want to donate $6 million and rename South Park, whatever?
The perception is that Lake Forest wouldn't do that without this.
But we could.
You could, certainly you could. I mean, you absolutely could, but when you talk to other parks and you talk to how the Nielsen Center got built, there's a perception that Lake Forest wouldn't do this. So this was a desire to create, at least the belief that it could happen. It may never happen.
I think it's useful to put it out there that we'll consider it. I take your point. And I think it's useful to have a framework. I agree with Alderman Moore, but it's really not Lake Forest. If Costco comes up and said, we'd like you to rename Town Line Park as Costco Park, I'd be hard pressed to do that. But I think this is a start, and we will always have the ability, if someone comes before us, to say no.
Absolutely.
So I don't see as though we're losing anything, and I'm willing to try it because we aren't going to get the kind of impact fee revenues and other things that we need to deliver the kind of parks that our residents would like. So I'm in favor of this. And I'd like to keep an open mind and see how it works in practice.
And certainly the language, and I got a phone call, so that's why I'm here. And I can't speak to the language of the exact ordinance, but I think the spirit of which it was taken was to be not Costco Park, but, in memorial to somebody significant and, founding father type of facility, and one that would make Lake Forest proud.
Would it be possible to see some examples of what you would have in mind from a budget standpoint, which parks might be available? This eventually, if it comes through, would be an extremely packed room sort of topic because of the affection that people have. But I mean, if Town Line and South Park or West Park or would some be on the list, off the list? I think something like this the idea of the policy would have to be very well vetted to avoid a full room at City Council, and I don't know where that would happen, but it's just one of those things that's going to touch a lot of people very strongly. And I think to understand that potential for revenue, which isn't listed here in ideas of dollars and cents and timing, some sort of pro forma, some sort of budget, I guess, would be appropriate. Are we talking about a $100,000 program or a $100 million program? I mean, it's not in here.
Yeah, this is not something that I don't think we're going to go actively solicit. It's going to take some time. One, there's a certain art and deftness to this type of endowment that I'm not sure, I'll certainly speak for myself, I have, and maybe even the park board doesn't have it. But there's no expectation that we're going to say, West Park is $1 million or $10 million or $50 million, because some of that depends upon whom is giving the money. And so it could be that 1 million is plenty, it could be that 10 million is not enough. And so there was no sort of budget. There was a thought in some of this that I think that was taken the wrong way of, we're not going to sell West Park. We're not going to even entertain a conversation for $100,000. This wasn't, there was a desire to set sort of a minimum, and maybe the city council has some thoughts on what a minimum might be. If somebody came in and said, $500,000, it's no, but $1 million, we'll talk.
I think the more price tags you put on the more things, the more problems you're going to have.
Well, and there wasn't really a desire to put price tag.
Right.
We never looked at this as, here is what it is, because it's hard to tell if this is today's dollars or 10 years from now. And
How
there
much
was
money
no,
would it bring in, though, I guess? Is it worth doing? You've looked at other communities, I know that, right?
Yes, certainly Highland Park has received millions of dollars in memorials.
We have also, right?
Not in the park system. I mean, maybe elsewhere within the city. I'm not aware of any in the
The
park
bricks and the
system.
trees and the benches in the parks, do you know what
Those
that's
are-
brought?
$500 to $1,000 donation. That's
Okay.
it.
Right.
And when they fail, right now, there's assumption that we're going to replace it, and we're, obviously having to go back to donors at this point and say, do you want to buy your bench again, kind of thing, but nothing,
Okay.
not a significant level. I think Forest Park, when they did the lakefront, was all privately, funded, and that's our best example of a great community effort.
Well, a
That
very
was
recent one is Eloa, David, and there are private donations there without having to give up naming or anything like that.
I would think philanthropically minded residents in this town, along with their financial advisors, in the once in a blue moon this is going to happen, will find their way to City Hall to get it done. And I agree with everybody's comments up here. I don't know whether we need a policy to make the constituents aware that we're open-minded to that. There's pros and cons to that. But this is going to be such a one-off, such a infrequent happening that I just have no doubt we can continue to handle it on an exception basis as it's been done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just going to be very frank again, and I know I'm restating, when you're talking about specific geographic areas, I have a real problem with the naming rights. Facilities like Winnetka with Nilsson Tennis Facility, wonderful. You're going to name a building in a specific area or give the naming rights, but again, if we're taking geographic areas, there has to be a limit to what you're willing to sell. And in this case, geographic areas in the city, at a certain point you could sell off street names. You could solicit donations for almost anything within reason. But there has to be certain things that are honors. For whatever reason in the city, in early discussions, Town Lake Park wasn't named Kennedy Park. It wasn't named for a specific person. It was named for more of an innocuous description. So the town has stayed away from that. And I can support facilities, but I think you have to draw a line at a certain point. You have to make certain things beyond dollar values. And I think there's a lot of sponsorship that could go for specific facilities, similar to Winnetka, but there has to be a limit. Yeah, you have to keep some aspect of the town for other generations. Just my thought. But if there was a limit, so again, we're not mixing certain parks with the naming rights with historic names and commercial names. When certain things are off limit, we can keep those for historic honors. But if we define what the boundaries are, now we know who we're honoring and who we're selling. And I think it's important to keep defined limits to it so
Certainly, people
know.
And I think the idea here is to bring this to the city council and let them make the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
But right now, there isn't even the ability to do that.
And I agree with what was provided, that it would come back to council eventually for approval after it's been submitted through parks. Agreed.
Yeah.
I could see,
Mr. Kiley has been.
Yeah, well, I know
trying
we're
to-
running out of time
Yeah.
here, and I do appreciate all the input. Let me make a suggestion, that staff go back and, based on the comments that are, that we've heard here this evening, rework this as a resolution, because with a resolution establishing a policy, we can lay out some recitals that try and capture the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then that memorializes what our intent is, and more importantly, what our intent is not. But I think also when you're looking at a policy, please keep in mind that while this is important for the residents, it's probably even more important for staff. Because quite candidly, looking around the history of Lake Forest, I wish we had had a little more policy and direction in place, because we probably wouldn't have taken some of the benches and some of the other quote-unquote donations that we've received that have quite probably cost us more money than we got when we made the original donation. And so some of this is really just guidelines that we have at a staff level, so when someone approaches us, we can simply say, okay, if you're interested, here is how this will get worked. And I think for us to try and come up with one final solution on how this policy is going to work for the next 50 years is probably not appropriate. And I think going to Alderman Edelman's point is that let's take them as a case by case, but have some broad parameters in how we're going to process them, more importantly, as they come in the future. So maybe, I know it's on your regular agenda this evening, we could just table that. That gives staff, working with Bob and the attorneys and others, a chance to rework this, adding some recitals and some other language based on what we've heard this evening. We'll bring it back to you at a future meeting.
could I recommend that it might be citywide then? For, you know, doors in the building, or sidewalks, or street names, or, I mean, I'm not being funny.
Yeah,
These are all things that could,
I think
like
we-
park
No,
benches.
I agree, maybe all assets, I just.
Doesn't,
All
yeah,
assets.
it's not a park, just be limited
Parks
to
and
parks
rec
and
assets.
recreation.
If that's the pleasure of the council, we could certainly broaden this and maybe have different sections. I mean, let us take a look at that and see if that's certainly the pleasure of the council, is to broaden this
Highway
to.
Way.
Yeah, a price for anything, right? Yeah, right.
Bob, thank you for all your efforts, though. I mean, really, I think we're in spirit where you are.
Well,
It's just when you read the paper, it doesn't look the same.
And that's why I came here, because it's not as it appears in black and white. It's to be in the tradition of Lake Forest, an endowment of an exceptional nature that everybody here and everybody in town could rally around. Not to sell another $10,000 item, but to really create a process where something significant could happen.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, do we need to make a motion to continue this, or?
Yeah, just direct staff to make changes and bring it back to the council at a later date.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda for the Finance Committee is other business. Do we have any other business? Nope. There being none, the last item before adjournment is an opportunity for the public to address the Finance Committee. Is there any member of the public that would like to address the Finance Committee? Okay, there being none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry.
Me and my colleagues would like to speak before the city council.
That's the
That's
next
coming
meeting.
up
That
next.
starts in 2 minutes, so.
5 minutes or so for city council?